is the product of a powerful collaboration. In 2019, the Village Initiative launched the Local Black Histories Project as an effort to create greater dialogue in the community about the history of the Black community in the greater Williamsburg area. The Village Initiative then formed a partnership with the Sociology Department of the College of William and Mary. To amplify this work, in 2021, we launched the Local Black Histories website, which offers an online archive of over 80 oral histories and curated exhibits. The project is governed by a community advisory board, including 17 leaders from the local Black descendant community. In early 2022, one of the descendants of the reservation community, Mrs. Mary Lassiter, reached out to us to see if the Local Black Histories Project would partner with the descendants of the reservation to build an online exhibit about this important history. We were thrilled to build this partnership. During the panel today, we are excited to share the online exhibit and let you hear from a range of different collaborators who each played a role in making this project happen. First, you will hear from William and Mary undergraduate student Annaliese Santana and graduate student Molly Robinson, who will overview some of the reservation history that they've worked on alongside students Brianna Rock and Phoebe Linnell and their faculty advisors, Amy Quark and Monica Gosson. Next, we will hear from Mrs. Mary Lassiter, a descendant of the reservation. And we would like to give a special recognition to Mary and Ms. Bernie Vaughn for their tireless work on this exhibit. Mary has reached out to so many descendant families to gather family histories, photos, and other documents. Bernie Vaughn, who I believe is with us on Zoom today, is an expert genealogist, and she's traced the lineage of many families to the reservation and has collected thousands of documents illuminating their lives. Mary will tell us more about this mountain of work that they've contributed. Then we'll hear from three more descendants of the reservation: Natalie, Reid Mallory, Rosa Lee, and Jacquelyn Gardner, who share with us their research on their ancestors, which powerfully highlights the lives of the reservation descendants and the legacies they have left for us today. But first, to introduce this important exhibit, we are thrilled to present this powerful short film featuring reservation descendants.
I think it's important that people ought to know what happened, to whom it happened, when it happened, and why it happened. And I can answer the question for you. Is that the why it happened was because there was a Black community in that area and they took the property.
There was this thriving community of oystermen and people. They had churches and schools and an entire community.
I think it's important that people ought to know what happened, to whom it happened, when it happened, and why it happened. And I can answer the question for you. Is that the why it happened was because there was a Black community in that area and they took the property.
there was this thriving community of, of oystermen and people. They had churches and schools and an entire community. It's important to tell that story, and not just to their families, but to our entire community.
They were property owners, business owners. They were tradesmen, oystermen, cabinet makers. They lived there. It was a self-sustaining community. No one will ever know that that community existed if we don't tell that story.
I believe a lot of them were oystermen. Some of the women, were cooks. I know that I had some sort of great aunt that was a midwife. So, they had jobs where they were needed. They did jobs that were needed during that time. I know that they had like I said, 2-story homes. They had oyster beds that they owned, apple trees, they lived off of the land.
They were all made to move. Can you imagine someone telling you tomorrow that you have to leave your house? During that time, there were not many places that African Americans could live.
So when did you first hear about the reservation? And you were a child and you just overheard?
Oh, when I was a child, my uncles, they would come together, especially on Sunday nights. And my uncle Johnny used to be the one who made the homebrew, and they would come together on Sunday nights, and we would sit around listening, and you pick up things, and they always refer to my brother did this, my brother did this. When you sit around them, and like I say, they never forgot where they came from. And that was part of the conversation. That would always come up. And like I said, my uncle Ezekiel would take me down, and I had no idea that we came out of Failgate Creek, and he carried me down and pointed out to where our ancestors came from. And he wanted me to know those things so I wouldn't forget it.
Well, it wasn't surprising that it happened, to be honest with you. But it was very surprising that it never was conversational. It was never anything that was discussed or talked about, because it was a major event that uprooted an entire community. And it was done in a way that did not really provide reparations or really beneficial amounts to say this is really substantially representing what you lost.
My grandmother was Annaliese Smith, and she married William Smith. And her mother was Martha Ella Taylor, and she married John Henry Lee. John Henry's parents were Emily Bird and James Monroe Lee. Well, I know that John Henry Lee was an oysterman. I found out that he and Martha both had oyster beds. And when they did the evaluation process, she told the government that she wanted about $6,000 for everything that she owned. It was a certain amount that she wanted for her house, a certain amount for her land. And she said that it meant a lot to her, that was where they had lived all their lives. And they had the convenience of getting fish and oyster right from the York River.
So she asked for $6,000. Do you know how much she received?
Yes, she got $1,930.
It's important to us to come out here. We still come out here and honor our family here, but to get on the property to Kiskiak Cemetery, which is known as Cheesecake Cemetery, we have to give 60 days notice. They have a limit of how many people can go. We've had a cousin that wanted to come in March she was going to be in town from Pennsylvania. She could not go.
It makes me sad to think that my ancestors are still buried on land that nobody can go and visit, that we can't go and see them. And just imagining their family leaving them there, leaving, their grandmother who was buried there and never being able to come back to see their headstone and to visit them like we can do, like we can go visit our family members at, the cemetery. So I know that, I don't know what she is, maybe my 5th great grandmother named Octavia, and she was married to an Anthony Hunley, and she is still buried at the cemetery at the reservation at York Naval Weapons Station. We actually went there back in September and was able to see her headstone still there on the property.
to me, it's crucial. I mean, people without knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. I generally call the history of Black people the greatest story never told, because we know so little about it. You know, there was an African philosophical saying that answered the question. When the question was asked, how do you know you exist? The answer is, I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. And that's the way I see this whole picture that's formulating in terms of what happened with the reservation. Because they were, I am and we are who we are today. I wouldn't be here, my family wouldn't be here. All of the hard work that they put in led to their being able to sustain themselves, continue their families, and keep progressing.
It's important to know where you came from, what they went through. It makes you have a different perspective on life, you know. It makes you have a connection with them. I feel like history should be told. It's not something that should be hidden or devalued or whatever. It's just, you know, it's life. It's the way that things were. And when you have people that have been treated unjustly, you need to tell about that. And I'm hoping that the ancestors know that we are doing this. It makes us feel good to think that they are up there, you know, looking down and saying, go Mary, go Carlin, go Crystal, you know, go Carla. And so we're hoping that there's some kind of connection, you know, even though we don't know what happens in life, but we're just hoping that we're some way that they're aware of this, because we know that they had to go through pure hell back then.
You know, this didn't come through, you know, just dropped. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of blessings from the Lord. They planted the seeds that he gave them. They cultivated those seeds. They watered them. They watched them grow. And now we're on their shoulders reaping that harvest. It's nice to be able to tell the story about our family and other families. And so we're standing on their shoulders.
So often, the statement is, well, if you work hard and you do the things that you should do, you'll have those rewards. In this case, they did all of those things. And as opposed to reward, they lost. But despite their loss, they, through their resilience and their determination, gained it and then more. And so much of that was, I think, again, their faith in God, their strength, and their love for family.
I would like to see more understanding. People have more understanding and respect, because I'm finding that in 2023, well, just wait, we're still having people who just feel as though you're Black, so you don't have certain rights, you know. So I would like to see it done in a way that we all will understand. Doesn't matter what, then people will understand that we are important, no matter what our skin color is.
We always hear folks say we don't want to repeat our past, so it's important for us to know our history. And that's one of the reasons that it's important, but it's also important to the families to know their history, to share it with their young people. It's important to tell that story, and not just to their families, but to our entire community, and important to teach the young people in school. I think this is an important story that needs to be told about how folks were dispossessed and their property was taken away, or they were moved off of their land, and what became of them, what became of the families, how the communities survived beyond that. And it just shows the resilience and the strength of the people, and people right here in our community who are part of that family. This amazing film is on our website, introducing the online exhibit. Now I will turn it over to Annaliese and
I think
Molly
it's important, and people ought to know.
to provide some highlights that you can learn about in the exhibit. Annaliese and Molly.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Annaliese Santana, and I am an undergraduate student, and I have been working with the local Black Histories project since summer 2022. This past year, I looked through local archives and photos of reservation residents, edited videos of oral histories, and worked on digital exhibits for Charles E. Brown, David and Eliza Lee, and Malachi and Anne Marie Wallace, and more. Bree Rock, another undergraduate researcher, and I have also presented to local elementary schools on important community figures we have researched. In the future, we hope to bring these incredible stories to more places. Working with the descendants of the reservation has been an honor. I had the privilege of meeting many of them at the Williamsburg Juneteenth celebration this past year, and once more at the reservation unveiling last month. These families have played a crucial role by providing us with archives and photos of their ancestors, doing oral histories with the project, and collaborating with the project to ensure that the history of the reservation is remembered. I believe it is crucial that we continue to listen to their stories and we don't allow them to be forgotten. Today, I am honored to share a bit about the reservation history. Indigenous communities were the first to inhabit the land where the Yorktown Naval Weapons Station now stands. When the British colonized Jamestown, the colonists burned down Kiskiak homes and stole their food supplies. The Kiskiak were forced to move further north. As the British colonized the Virginia Peninsula, many Black people were enslaved on plantations. However, a significant free Black population also grew from 1790 onwards, forging the community that would become known as the reservation. This population, according to the US Census, 140 free Black families were living in York County by 1860, making up 14% of the county's population. 19 of these families owned the land that they farmed, and 49 families owned boats for fishing and oystering, as well as livestock. This population includes William and Betsy Thornton. Their great-granddaughter, Fanny Epps, described the cabin they built in the reservation with one big room and a fireplace. In their later years, they papered the walls with newspaper and thought it was just grand when their great-granddaughter, Fanny, was learning to read and could read the wallpaper back to them. Families in the reservation included those who were enslaved and fought valiantly for their freedom in the Civil War. Mr. Edward Ratcliffe joined the Union Army and served in the United States Colored Troops. Edward Ratcliffe won the military's highest award, a Medal of Honor, one of only 16 Black soldiers to receive this honor. Following the war, Mr. Ratcliffe returned to live in the reservation. During and after the Civil War, the reservation community grew substantially, as did the community of Black landowners. In 1870, Jacob and Mary Ann Holmes owned 13 acres of land as well as livestock. They would later expand their land holdings, owning as much as 250 acres at one point. Jacob Holmes was also one of the first deacons of St. John's Baptist Church, the church that will soon be led by his descendant, pastor-elect Carlin Lassiter. Similarly, Edgar and Sarah Christian raised corn and vegetables on fields by the York River. Their daughter, Miss Beulah Christian Scott, remembered picnicking on the riverbank with her brother as children and sneaking some tea, which they weren't supposed to be drinking. Reservation residents also forged a legacy of activism and advocacy in this period following the Civil War. For example, in 1867, Peyton Jones filed a grievance with the Freedmen's Bureau requesting reimbursement for a stolen horse. Indeed, reservation residents became knowledgeable of the legal system to obtain deeds to protect their property. For example, in 1903, reservation residents William and Nancy Redcross obtained this title for a 5-acre tract of land. This legacy of advocacy would be carried on by many of the residents of the reservation who advocated for the community when the US government came to take their land in 1918. Now I will pass it on to Molly. Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Robinson. I am a PhD student in the American Studies program at William & Mary, and I do social outreach and coordination for the village. And my involvement in this collaboration, it began about a year ago after I was awarded a grant through William & Mary's Sustainability Office. So at the time, I was really interested in land ownership and patterns of Black-owned land loss in the Virginia Tidewater. When I got in touch with Amy and Jackie in the village, I found out that Miss Mary Lassiter had already sent a lot of materials and had organized her family to begin telling the story of this displacement. So I saw this really as an opportunity to put my skills to use and to participate in a project that already had really wonderful momentum. So since last April, I've been conducting oral histories. I've been really privileged to work with descendants, to write exhibit copy, to go on these research trips to the National Archive to scan records and make them available to families, which has been just an incredible and really moving experience. Recently, I've been able to plan workshops to help with the interpretation of some of the historical and legal dimensions of this eminent domain event. So I feel really honored to continue to be able to listen to descendants and support their efforts to reconnect with their ancestral homelands. So I'll continue the story a bit. So many Black families in the reservation were oysterers. Humphrey Payne sold oysters as far as Richmond and forged autonomy as an independent entrepreneur. And John Henry Randall owned oyster grounds with his brother William. Oystering was skilled work, but also very dangerous work. For example, James Wallace, an oysterman, died of accidental drowning on May 30th, 1913. According to family oral history, James Wallace was working the water with his son Howard during a storm when he died. Residents of the reservation also worked together to build community spaces amid segregation, such as the Rising Sun School. In an oral history, Alexander Lee recalled that every Sunday, St. John Baptist Church members dropped nickels and dimes in the collection plate to send Annie Bell Jones to Hampton Institute to become a teacher. Churches were the primary community centers in the reservation. Rising Sun Baptist Church, which met first in a log cabin, was established shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation and before the end of the Civil War on November 2nd, 1864. St. John Baptist Church traces its roots to a Sunday school organized in Black Swamp Hill in 1874 and gained official recognition 10 years later when John and Margaret Roberts offered a half acre of their land for the price of $8 to serve as a church site. Finally, Little Zion Baptist Church, which began as an open-air meeting, was founded by Deacon Isaac Reid and branched off from St. John. So by the early 20th century, the Black families in the reservation community were landowners, flourishing entrepreneurs, skilled artisans, and hardworking, civic-minded community members. This was in spite of economic adversity and institutionalized racism. These thriving communities of landowners were precisely what was at stake when the US government commandeered their land in 1918 to build the Navy Mine Depot, now known as the Naval Weapons Station. This is just a glimpse of the powerful history that is told in our online exhibit. We're continuing this work and we'll build 3 more segments of the exhibit. The next segment will explore the US government's use of eminent domain to displace families and will highlight the activism of the reservation community. The third segment explores how families rebuilt after the displacement. And then the final segment explores the activism of families today to have this story told. We're currently conducting more research
We have a lot of documents. As we work to complete these segments, we'd like to recognize Miss Rosa Lee, who has done extensive research at the National Archives in DC and found full testimonies from reservation residents advocating for just compensation. Following Rosa Lee's paper trail, I was able to go to the archives with undergraduate research fellow Bree Rock, who's in the audience, to find the testimonies that the archivist said didn't exist. And we actually returned home with more than 5,000 pages of testimony from reservation residents at the court hearings that were conducted at Yorktown, about 150 claimant files and over 300 photos and maps. So now that we have the history, let's hear from Jackie again before we hear from the descendants.
I will briefly tell how I became involved with the Village Initiative and telling the reservation history and my part in building the online exhibit. My cousin Rosa Lee encouraged me to pursue the history of our family's displacement. They are the Lees, the Holmeses, the Taylors, and the Minkins. Rosa told me about the dissertation Shannon Mahoney had written in 2013. Rosa had visited the National Archives and found the testimonies. She read and copied some of the pages pertaining to our relatives. She discovered while reading the testimonies, there were photos that had been taken by the government, and the residents were to sign on the back to identify their homes. She read some of the homes were not going to be considered in the valuation process because of their condition. We had these small portions of information, but not many avenues to share it with the public. I contacted Jacquelyn Bridgeforth-Williams of the Village Initiative and briefly shared the history of the reservation and the importance of it being told. I eventually met with Professor Amy Quark, Molly Robinson, and my cousin Christine James, who brought photos and reunion booklets. The excitement was on. We began doing oral history interviews of our families. I knew we needed other families involved because a published report from March 1993 by William and Mary Scholars stated there had been at least 600 families in the reservation. I took on the responsibility along with my cousin Bernie Vaughn of finding some of them. Bernie is not a descendant of the reservation residents, which makes her assistance even more appreciated. Our main sources of finding the other families were the prayer petition, the 1865 census for colored people in York County, along with federal census, testimonies to the Board of Valuation on commandeered property, and the Cook Notebook. I used social media to inquire if anyone recognized the names. The Nathan Reid family was recognized by his grandson, Nathaniel. The Robert Ashby family was on a federal census report, and Christine James recognized the names. The Maria Wallace family was on the prayer petition and recognized by her great-granddaughter, Maria Palmer Washington. We worked like an assembly line, each person performing a duty that was needed to produce the exhibit. Bernie and I worked closely together, gathering information and passing it to Professor Quark. Some of the documents Bernie found were military draft records, which often listed the occupations of the males, newspaper articles, vital records, and obituaries. Most impressive to me was her expertise in maneuvering the Freedmen Bureau's records. She found work contracts from 1865, food rationing records, and a document that showed my great-great-grandmother had received a dress in 1868. One discovery that was special to Bernie was William Crawford Casey, also known as Mickey Casey, a catcher with the American Negro League. Bernie estimated finding approximately 1,500 records for my three families and 98 just for Burl Morris, a Buffalo soldier. I obtained land records, estate settlements, obituaries, maps, and other documents. I was the liaison between the families and the rest of the team. Family input is very important. We need the data and their pictures. There are some families that had spent many years in the Magruder community, but are not aware their family members had once lived in a reservation. One such family is Michael Druitt's maternal side, the Harrells. Bernie traced the family to his 5 times great-grandmother, Matilda Harrod, who owned 3 acres of land in the reservation. The spelling of the surname changed over the generations, and there were at least 4 variations and different pronunciations. Bernie also found contracts for Michael's 5 times great-grandfather, Macklin Wallace, a farmer on the 1865 census. His residence was listed as the Tinsley Farm. Michael is also a member of the Kiskiak Chickahominy tribe. The Kiskiak were the first inhabitants of the reservation. His lineage through his grandfather, Lord Harrell, can also be traced to Chief William Henry Atkins, who married Virginia Bradley. They are his 5 times great-grandparents. The theses and dissertation by William Mary students have helped us to learn about our family's displacement. I'm thankful to the Village Initiative and William and Mary for helping to make this history come to life. I can safely speak for the descendants and guests in saying we are forever grateful to Dr. Jamal Donner's part in making the February 4th celebration of the online unveiling a memorable event.
My paternal grandparents lived in the reservation community. My grandmother, Nancy Day, was born there to Henry and Sarah Day. And my grandfather, Nathaniel Reid Sr., was living there at least by 1907 when they married. They were involved in the church and the community in the reservation. By the 1910s, Nathan was serving as a trustee of the Little Zion Baptist Church. In 1914, he and another trustee, Robert Port, signed a deed on behalf of the church to purchase a half-acre of land in the church for the church site. The congregation built a small church and were making plans for the future. A few years later, Nathan Reid would again represent the church in legal matters, but this time to defend the church when the United States government announced that they would take their land to build the Yorktown Naval Weapons Station. Nathan Reid joined with other community members to sign the prayer petition, asking the government for more time to locate. Nathan Reid also played an important role alongside the pastor and other trustees in advocating for the church. Together, they wrote at least 2 letters to the government, asking for the right to stay on their land, including this letter dated January 1st, 1919, where they wrote, and I quote, "To our government, we, the Little Zion Baptist Church, petition you to please have mercy on us as we only occupy a half-acre land. And as we have such a small place, we're asking that our government will let us continue to occupy that spot," unquote. The government, of course, did not let them stay. And Nathan Reid testified before the government regarding the value of the land and the buildings on the church's behalf in an effort to obtain just compensation. Nathan Reid continued to serve as a deacon of the Little Zion Baptist Church after the church was pushed off the reservation and the church was rebuilt in Grove. The resilience and persistence of these generations that lived on the reservation have paved the way for really 6 generations following Nathaniel Reid Sr. and Nancy Day Reid. Nathan Reid Sr. and Nancy Day had 11 children. My father, Nathaniel H. Reid Jr., was one of the 7 born on the reservation. My father carried on his parents' legacy from the reservation with his focus on hard work and diligence. He forged a new future for the family when they were displaced. After World War II, my father was hired as a bellman at the Williamsburg Inn, a hotel, a 5-star hotel at that time, known for its elegance and first-class service. In 1947, he was named captain of the Bell Force. A few years later, he noted that more and more of the guests were asking for televisions in their rooms. Recognizing an opportunity, he presented a proposal for management to the management. The permission was granted to rent televisions, and this entrepreneurial venture became an important means to an end for Reid, who was my father. In 1964, he was promoted to the position of Superintendent of Services, a job that he held until he retired in 1986, with over 40 years of service. However, they called him back to work, and he went back against my mother's wishes. His motto was, "Service is my business." In 1967, he received the National Bellman of the Year Award in recognition of his hard work and commitment to excellence. This is a picture of my dear mother, my dear father, receiving the award. The award was a trip to Chicago for 1 week with all expenses paid. Another important legacy that Nathaniel Reid Jr. and my dear mother, Mary Elizabeth Reid, passed on was a focus on education, which was instilled in the next generations to come. I am a retired school teacher. My sister Carolyn is a retired college professor and was the first female president of Fisk University. And my brother, Nathaniel III, is a retired teacher and principal in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have passed these legacies forward to the next generation, including my son, Kevin Thomas Boykins, as we see they're graduating from Morehouse College with my mother and my father and me, and I'm sorry, with me. We have passed these legacies forward to our next generation, including my son, Kevin Boykins. His daughter is Rikaya Boykins, who's a graduate of Weiner University, and she's a registered nurse. Her daughter and her 2 sons, Isaiah and Chaz. My son, Kevin, has taken an early retirement as a regional director of pharmaceutical instructions for the Pfizer pharmaceutical company. Thank you. And I wish to say thank you to Mrs. Mary Lassiter and also to Dr. Amy, Dr. Amy Quark who encouraged me, aided me, assisted me, and thank you, Dr. Quark, and thank you, Ms. Lassiter, for pulling me in.
Hello, my name is Jacquelyn Gardner, and I will tell you about my grandfather and how the Roberts District got its name. John Augustus Roberts was born in 1855 to William Henry and Bessie Roberts. He had one brother, William Bill Roberts, and three sisters, Sarah, Victoria, and Ella. He was married to Eleanor Hundley for 47 years, and they had 9 children. He also lived on the reservation. I did do some research, and I have it here. In 1918, the United States government determined it needed the land where their homes and churches were built, and he owned his property, but they paid him for his property the sum of $2,690. Leaving the reservation, they moved to the Grove community nearby the Carter's Grove Plantation in James City County. And there, many other families moved to the Grove location and the Grove community. My grandfather was an active member of the community. I read where he was part of the Transportation League that provided public transportation for the children to go to the James City County Training School. Well, they had a little business where he and his relative had a bus, but the families had to pay for that transportation. So what he did, he petitioned some of his colleagues to provide free transportation for those children in James City County, and won that petition. Going back a little earlier, he served as a justice of the peace in York County. And there, I think he probably signed the birth certificates and death certificates, but he could read and write according to the census report. And he was a self-taught man. So serving as a justice of peace, he had some friends. I looked at some of the records, and I picked up names such as Judge Frank Armstead in Williamsburg, held his first court session in Justice Roberts' court, which was probably held in his home or in a church or someplace like that. He was given the name honorary justice of the peace because of his relationship with those people, and because he was very active in the community, and he took leadership in the community, and we are proud of that. Also, when James City County was cut out and determined it needed a 5th district, the community petitioned to have the county named the Roberts District, that piece of the county, and Lower County, Grove. So there he was recognized by the community for his service. I have also here that he was a member of the trustee board of the first African Baptist church on Nassau Street. He served in that position until his death in 1932. He was a member of First Baptist Church, but when he died, his funeral was held at First Baptist Church, but he was buried beside his wife, Eleonora, at St. John Baptist Church. Love forever. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosa Lee. I didn't have any prepared notes, but I just want to share a shout out, thank you to Dr. Amy and her students, Molly, and the people at the Village Initiative. Family history has been an interest of mine for quite some time. I started writing and talking about my family history at a time when they were like looking at me like, I don't care what you're talking about. But I began to write my story or our story on bits and pieces of paper, and I called it Quiet Determination. I called it Quiet Determination based on the sons of James Monroe Lee. Mary had a picture up of him earlier, but he was one of the residents of the reservation, and he had 4 sons and a daughter. So as I began to write and think about those families, that was my story, Quiet Determination, how they lived and led their lives and moving off the reservation. And my story, Quiet Determination, led to a lot of what went in our family history documents and at our family history reunions. We didn't have a lot of family reunions. I think our first family reunion was in 1991. And at that reunion, it was like a half-day affair on a Sunday afternoon. Over 300 and some people showed up for that reunion. And I was just amazed at the people who were present, who were relatives in our family. So that's, you know, family history has been a big interest of mine over the years. In all my writings and note-taking, I was really surprised when Mary took an interest in what I was collecting and talking about. She's taken it to a whole different level because it's now documented. It's just not on my bits and pieces of paper that I was collecting and keeping in notebooks about my house. I remember I used to go to the archives, pull out materials, just sit and read. This was back in the day that on a Friday evening, you could just drive down to the archives. I park my car and go in. Fridays was a good time to go because it was not crowded. You could be on machines as long as you want to. I remember taking my daughter down with me. She was like 8 or 9 years old, but she was definitely helping me to do the research. And I was collecting this information and just collecting it. But I finally did put it together in my booklet, which I'm calling a book that one of these days it will be written, called Quiet Determination. At one point when I was glad to hear Annaliese say that she's been researching David and Eliza Lee, because David Lee is, quote, the brother of my great-great-grandfather, James Monroe Lee. And I have not been able to find anything on David Lee. I even went to Salt Lake City to the Mormon library there. And when I pulled his record, it was empty. Whatever information was there, it's not there. So I would like to talk with you after that. I do know that David Lee served in the Civil War. Supposedly he was taken to Boston and served in the Civil War. Where his information is, I have no idea, but that's another story for that. But in my research at the archives, I had run across the testimonies of the families leaving the reservation. And when I went through the books, I found 4 volumes of testimonies. These books, you have to request them. You can only get 1 book at a time. When you go into the reading room, you can't take anything in the reading room with you except for a cell phone. They even give you the pencils to write with and the papers. But as I was reviewing the testimonies, I made copies of only my grandmother and my grandfather, where they were talking to the Navy commanders who had taken their property, describing their properties and asking to be reimbursed. So you had to scan copies, and it was 89 cents a page at that time to scan copies. But anyhow, I made copies of their requests. I think I sent Mary a copy. But sometimes when you get this information and share it, it goes to a much wider force. And I do appreciate the work of Women Merit College, or the assistance in helping to get our story out. Because there were many members in the family who they had heard stories about this, but they had no idea of what had come of it. I remember my uncle, Alexander Lee, who was like our family historian. When I shared some of the things with him, he would look at it and say, oh, yes, I heard about that. But he didn't know the results of everything that had gone on. So it was a real privilege for me to dig into this information and get the story. One thing that helped to carry this on was that my daughter, when she went to college, she had come here to Williamsburg for a month to participate in a dig on the grounds of the governor's palace. And when she was on her 1 month dig, she met another student by the name of Shannon Mahoney. Shannon was a graduate student here at William and Mary. And when Shannon finished her dissertation, she forwarded a copy of her dissertation to my daughter and like, oh, I'm finished. Share this with your mom. You said she was from Virginia. So my daughter sent me a copy of it. So I'm sitting at my home, just reading the reservation. Reading Shannon's dissertation. And in reading it, I see all of this information about my family that in my years of research, I had never seen a copy of the petition, had not even heard that the families that had left the reservation had even signed the petition. And I see actually their signatures, their story, and information that I had been researching, but just had not discovered at that time. And I was simply amazed and very thankful to get the copy of Shannon's reservation. I had not met her, only from her sharing her dissertation with Nidra, and who was my daughter. So that information, I have shared it with Mary, and I give a lot of kudos to Mary, who has taken that work and just brought it to the extent where it is today. I mean, our story is out. We can't call it untold stories anymore. It's a local history story that's out. It's documented. It's going to be on film. Mary is very creative in creating things, and I'm most grateful that that story will be told and will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Good. Yes.
And we're going to open the floor for questions. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I didn't tell the ladies, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing life to the reservation story and for being living, breathing history. And also I want to take a moment to say there's a few people, I don't know, Janice is not here, but when you talk about the work that we do and that the village does and the projects that we do, I hope people walk away understanding that it's a lifelong journey and that there is a team that stands behind us. They're not all here today because we have several projects, we have families, we have lives, we work full-time jobs, but we put everything into the work that we do. When we started this in 2016, it was the money out of my pocket, Philip Kennedy's pocket, and the vision that God gave me. I walked away from a job after 30-something years of service because God told me this is what I needed to do. When I look out here, and I don't know if she can stand or not, but Edith Cookie heard, if you'll stand, I want people to know that people like Edith who have mentored me, my entire life as an employee at Colonial Williamsburg and how she led to start the union here in Williamsburg and has been a history advocate most of her life. My mother, Ellen Bridgeforth, who was probably one of the smartest women to graduate from Williamsburg, James City County Schools, who introduced me to books and who I would watch read an entire novel in one day and could tell you everything in that novel. Those ladies, Linda Ashby, who has mentored me. I want people to remember that there are people in this community who live and breathe to tell the history, and that we have to remember and honor when we talk about the work, that the work is not, it's a collection. The college has partnered with us and collaborated with us to do the work, but believe you and me, this has been some lifelong blood, sweat, and tears. People have worked, people have been sick. I'm looking at another young lady who's here that was a part of the village work during COVID. During COVID, these people came out right here with the mask on. The people that came out and gave out over 2,400 boxes of food a week with us. I just want y'all to know the platform of the village. We raised over $40,000 to do food pantries during COVID. We give out over 500 books a month to the community through our early learning and literacy program, because we care about early learning and literacy, and we know that reading matters to our children. The equity report that we present at the school board meetings to talk about the inequities in Williamsburg, James City County schools that have existed since integration and continue to exist today. The courageousness of the people who go out with us to those school board meetings, the College of William Mary students who work so hard on the projects they are courageous. They go to school board meetings, even when people are throwing daggers at us, they stand in their truth with us. They go into the schools. We have created curriculums of African-American history that are taught in WJCC schools. We have teams that had gone in and did projects, and Alton and Matt, who were able to teach the children about integration. And the very first class to integrate schools in Williamsburg, James City County was presented to those students. But before that, those students from the College of William and Mary, along with the village's support and tutelage, taught those children about integration and taught them what it meant. So when that class came in, those kids were prepared with questions and respect and honor. So I say, we have to respect and honor all who do this work, and we stand on the shoulders of greatness. I listened to everyone, Miss Natalie, when you talked about your dad and being in Colonial Williamsburg, and all of the stories, I know the importance of those folks who went before us and worked in Colonial Williamsburg, and we came behind them. And as I told the group earlier today, I was one of the first, I guess, African-American captains in Colonial Williamsburg, because being a captain was considered something very honorable. So I just want to acknowledge the village, the collaborators at the college, Jawan Johnson, and everyone at the Lemon Project who does this work, Jody, and just thank you all. Before we move forward, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to the village team. And I needed to let people know a little bit about what the village is, because it's just not me standing here in front of you. There's an entire team that works behind us and a vision that only God could give for a community. And so I just want to say thank you. And if there's any questions for the ladies, I know they're more than happy to answer your questions today. Yes.
First captain is because Colonial Williamsburg didn't put women in that position. So she was the first female captain, right, that we had in the banquet department. And I also would like to share with you the fact that Shannon Mahoney and I were very good friends, and I helped her walk through the book, her dissertation. And I want to let you know that I also did an oral history of Ms. Bingley, who came out of Camp Perry. And I have that too. And she talked about how they treated her. And she was a white lady, white family. They treated them the same way they did the Black people.
Thank you, Eden.
Yeah, we have a question from Zoom. It's from Terry Myers. As a statement and a question. It is terrible that descendants face such hassles to visit the graves at Cheesecake Cemetery. The limitation seems pointless and just mean. Could our U.S. senators or our representatives in the House of Representatives maybe get those barriers lowered? So if there's been any push to change those barriers as it relates to Kiskiak Cemetery?
To my knowledge, there's no push to do that. Cemetery is secure property as a naval depot. When we were there this last September, just to put a marker on 143, we couldn't even sit facing the depot. We had to sit facing Route 143. So that's something we have not really pursued and looking, you know, to lower barriers to gain access to the site.
I'd like to share this with you. Mr. John Roberts, his family had a program at the Naval Weapons Station, and all the families out of Grove and East Williamsburg, we visited the Naval Weapons Station. And the first thing Mr. Roberts said was that was not the original spot of the grave, and that they had manufactured that. And that's why so many of the headstones are all cracked up and beat up, because that is not the actual spot. And when they found out the Black history stuff and Blacks wanted to go in there, they created this makeshift with 3 headstones all beat up and said that was the cemetery. But it is actually, when I talked to my Aunt Edith, who passed away, she was 93 years old, she told me also that was not the original spot of the cemetery.
Right.
I just wanted to concur with what Cookie or Edith had said. At the Lee family reunion in 1991, it was on a Saturday, but we did go to the Naval Weapons Station on Sunday. And we did not have those restrictions. In fact, the bus picked us up, took us there, and we did, you know, were able to tour it. Now, mind you, 9/11 had not happened then. But her Aunt Edith, who was one of, you know, of the Lees who attended it, she was saying, even though she was a child there, she said, no, this is not right. These graves were not here. She had problems with something about the steps. Things were moved, she said. And I guess knowing that we were coming, they modified things, but she was not pleased with it. Now, Jackie's sister, Miss Edna Roberts, who she approached me weeks later because I was in charge of the family reunion. And she told me Edith's concern, how she was displeased with the things that she noticed at Naval Weapons. And as Edna talked to me, you know, what could I say? I asked my mom, who is this? But after we got to be friends, she told me who she was. I didn't know all of the Roberts, even though we are family, but she said they were on the Tinsley plantation also. So not to make it long, but what I'm saying, there had been discrepancy, and I had conversations from the older people. I'm old now, but 1991, I wasn't. The older people who went on the buses with us, they were pleased to be there, but they knew everything was not the way it was supposed to be. So I had heard that, so I'm glad Cookie brought it up. Now, jumping back in 2016, the Lees had another family reunion. And of course, we requested, of course, months ahead of time to go there. Oh, they made it hard, but they had promised, you know, something about a bus. They waited till the day before the reunion to say they could not do a bus. Now, we had people coming from out of town, and the person who made the contacts and, had a guarantee that we could go there. She would not stand for it. So what they said, we will escort you. You all can drive as a caravan. So we said, well, that's good. We just want to go back there. Okay. When we followed them, we had other people who didn't know the area that well, but they came, they could see us. I had a nephew who came from Texas. He could see us. They would not allow him to say, no, you should have been there the minute when they all pulled off together. So I wasn't pleased with this last one, but I was glad to be back there again. But, and with the different restrictions and all, I was glad to be there, but I thought of what her Aunt Edith had said, years before then, and then seeing the experience, then I just didn't know what to think of it. In fact, I think I had to give them a map to tell them some of the things that they were saying about, the gravesite and all. So it is something does need to be done. And I wish I had the spirit of this young lady who was doing the presentation, but I guess we have to leave it to the young ones to do. Something needs to be done.
Dr. Johnson, if I may just add this real quickly. I did speak with someone that had just recently visited Camp Perry. He said that their waiting period was only 30 days. So that's something that can be checked into. Camp Perry's 30 days, Naval Weapons Station is 60 days.
Thank you. Anyone else? This is our final presentation, so we have a little time.
Hello, my name is Burnell Irving. My family came out of York County, the Bruton district. What happened to, I know some of the families wound up in Grove. Okay, so when my family got put out of Magruder, which I've been researching myself, they wound up in Grove. So we're probably neighbors in Grove. And I can also concur because we got into Camp Perry, I think about 2012, and you couldn't stand this way and take photographs of something this way. And we couldn't find my great-great-grandparents' graves. What else was going on? Oh, right after, probably within a year of going into Camp Perry, my mother sitting right here was on the telephone talking with someone and brought up our trip into Camp Perry. And then a third voice appeared. Hello. I'm what did he say his name was? Chuck or something? I'm Chuck from the CIA.
You know, Camp Perry is a CIA station.
Yeah.
You know that.
Mm-hmm. These are secured military installations.
Yeah, so they had broken into the phone call.
Right.
They were listening and broke into the phone call.
Hey, you're just not gonna get on them just like, anybody's business.
No.
It's very difficult to get into a secure military facility. And that's what they are. I mean, when they took over the reservation in 1918, that was for the purpose of mining,
They were storing the mines there.
right, to go into World War I.
Yeah.
And like you say, Camp Perry is a CIA facility. So you're just not gonna be able to walk and go into these places.
Yeah, I had
easily.
When I was in the archives, I had an archivist tell me Route 64 going past Camp Perry is the most secure, not secure, the most watched. They have more surveillance cameras on that stretch of 64 than anywhere else in the country. Now, when we're in there, we went looking for where Mount Gilead Baptist Church was. They had torn it down. The other church was still there. I think the Three Rivers or whatever the name of that church, the Presbyterian church, it was still there, pristine condition. But Mount Gilead had been torn down.
Mm.
The last 3 days. It's been such a blessing to hear all of the history of our area, and I am so happy. I noticed the churches, and I want to give honor and thanks to Dr. Jody Allen and her staff here at the College of William and Mary. And I would be so remiss if I did not give honor and praise to Mrs. Jacquelyn or Jackie Bridgeford Williams and the Village Initiative. This has been such a wonderful experience for all of us who attended and for those that are watching as well on Zoom. I have played at all of the churches in the area that was mentioned yesterday. And I was so inspired to just sing a little bit of a song that was mentioned in one of the presentations. So today, I given honor to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for bringing us and keeping us. And you know, as I think about it, the songs that old people did many, many years ago kept their spirit high and kept them from going crazy in the midst of all that was happening to them and their families. So today, before we close, and I'm not sure if I'm in order right this moment to sing, but I would like to sing, as I did yesterday, just a little short something of one of the initiatives that was mentioned on yesterday. And we will sing it all together as a choir. I'm not here to perform, but I am here to thank God for what we have experienced on yesterday and today.
Okay.
And I say, what a mighty God we serve. And I want to thank this College of William and Mary and the others that I have mentioned for having this type of program for this community and the world to look at and see what is going on in Williamsburg, Virginia, where it all began. I'm so grateful. And the 2 songs that I'd like to sing just a little bit of is the ones that we used to sing years ago. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Sing with me. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Glory, hallelujah. And then the other one is, you all can be part of it if you so desire. I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside. Love study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. That kept our old slaves sanctified and having the initiative to keep on moving forward, even in their worst conditions. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you.
All right. Any final remarks from our presenters?
Well, I want to say on behalf of the entire Village Initiative team, board members, local Black Histories board members, we would like to thank the ladies today from the reservation families. It has been our honor, and it is an honor to continue to serve this great vision and this great collaboration to tell the stories of the families of the reservation. Thank you. And as we said previously at another event that we know that this is African-American history and this is American history. Tell the truth about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is our final session, but we want to thank you all so much for joining us for this 2023 Lemon Project Symposium. At 4 p.m., we're actually going to meet at the memorial to the enslaved. I think Dr. Allen may have some remarks as well, but just want to thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Jackie Williams. Thank you, Amy. Thank you to all of those who've collaborated with us over the past couple of years and the work research that I've been doing. We deeply appreciate you, and we hope that you're able to meet us at the memorial to further learn about the work that we're doing with the Lemon Project. Thank you.